morning, aloha, and welcome to the informational briefing of the Senate Special Accountability Committee on Procurement. We'll hear today from the Department of Transportation Airports Division. Today is Tuesday, August 17th at 10:30 a.m. We are in conference room 211 with members Senator Kim and myself here in the room and others to come, and Senator Favela zooming in. Presenters are joining us remotely via video conference. I'm Sharon Moriwaki, chair of this special committee, and we also asked, so Senator Kim is here with me live in room 211, and Senator Favela is zooming in. We also asked Interim State Procurement Officer Bonnie Kahukui to also join us as we seek to improve our procurement policies and procedures for the state. First, a few housekeeping announcements. This briefing is being streamed live on YouTube. You can find links to the briefings and presentation documents on the live and on-demand video page of the Capitol website under the Special Committee on Procurement webpage. The committee's charge is to improve the state procurement and contracting policies and procedures. The focus, how we can better serve the public by procuring goods, services, and construction more quickly through clear, fair, and consistent standards. We build on the work of the Government Operations Committee last session. Two measures signed into law, and I see that the department has provided that information to us in their presentation as well. One is requiring all departments to evaluate and post performance of construction contracts so all departments can benefit from the experience of others toward the best performing contractors for our state work. And second, on bid protests, setting deadlines for departments to assess and decide on protests. This is not to preclude protests, but to improve procurement and use these protests, if not frivolous, to improve our procedures. I see Deputy Director Rasigashi and also Director Jay Butai and your team on Zoom. So I'll turn it over to Director Butai to first tell us about their procurement and protest procedures and the staffing and training for their procurement efforts and the challenges and suggested recommendations for addressing them. So Jade, you're going to start first, Director, and then yes, off to Rasigashi, Deputy Director for the Airports Division. Could you introduce anybody else that's online with you on Zoom? Aloha.
So, Deputy Director of Administration in Araki Reagan, Airports Administrator David Shogun, Engineering Manager Dai Chinutsubo. They're all with us. Airports Operations Manager Alex Demoria, and School Manager Kurt Yamasaki.
Okay, please proceed. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Moriwaki, and also to the members of the Senate Special Committee on Accountability, Senator Kim, Senator Favela. My name is Jade Butai, Director for the Department of Transportation. DOT is a procurement machine. We buy goods, services, construction, etc.
Can we get a little louder?
Statewide, we
excuse me,
for
Jay, before you proceed, Kira, can you make it a little louder? It's a little bit difficult to hear.
Okay, thank you, Senator.
Yeah.
I'll make it louder. Okay, Senator, it's louder now, I think. Is this okay?
Director, can you try again and see if the sound was not coming through? We want to hear you. Every word.
We buy goods, services, construction, etc. Statewide, we account for over 50% of procurement. We handle a variety of contracts and situations which frequently require special handling provisions or other specialized terms and conditions. Contract examples include construction projects related to new buildings, roads, bridges, highways, airports, and docks. I introduced my team, so let me turn it over to Ross to share.
Thank you and good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning. In preparation of today's meeting, in our observation, the state's procurement code has been established and refined over many decades to assure procurement of government funds are utilized properly, ethically, and in a fair and open environment. We applaud the introduction of Senate Bill 1329, which became law under Act 224 this past session, which will decrease the length of time to resolve bid protests and implement a stricter monetary penalty for frivolous protests. At the end of our presentation, we will share a few suggestions to improve the process with you folks. Jade, want to say anything else?
Thank you, Ross. And we will share and highlight portions of our presentation based on your requested topics. Let me just begin by saying that our staff are the unsung heroes. They need and deserve the resources, support, and training to succeed. They're in the trenches analyzing tough choices that involve weighing not just costs, benefits, and risks, but also competing principles and sometimes even conflicting rules. Mistakes will always be made, but the least we can do is try to make original mistakes rather than repeating old ones. The best is to learn from other people's mistakes, and that is why training is so critical. How do we give our people room but not to run amok? DOT is committed to continuing to improve our procurement by incorporating best practices to efficiently procure goods and services. We do appreciate the support accorded by the committee in revamping our as none of this is attainable unless we pursue these goals together. With that, I would like to pass the baton to Lynn to go over our procurement training procedures.
Before we start, can I interject? Is there a way that I can get share screen access, or can I share our presentation online?
Yes, hold on. Duncan, can we do? Akira, can we do?
It's available. Senator.
Yes, it is available.
Go ahead, Ron.
Okay. Okay, can we see that?
Not yet.
Check. Not yet? Hold on a second. How does it share? Okay. How about now?
Yes?
Yes.
Good.
Okay. How do I make this bigger?
I think you want it smaller.
No, you gotta make it full screen.
So full screen.
How's that?
Yeah,
Good, yeah.
yeah.
All right. So I'll turn it over to Lynn, and she's gonna go over our training process.
Thank you, Airports Deputy Director Higashi, and good morning, Senators. Good morning, Chair. So I'm going to be talking about training today. So pursuant to the State Procurement Officer's Procurement Delegation Memo from 2010, employees who do participate in the procurement process shall be required to complete procurement education and training pursuant to HRS 103D 110. This training needs to be completed within 60 days of being appointed or named to the position of procurement officer. Next slide. Okay, so upon completion of the necessary training, our business management office within the DOT processes the SPO 036 form for the employee. Thanks to the SPO as well as the DHERD department, employees can now access whatever procurement training that's required of them via DHERD's learning management system, also known as LMS. Our business management office, led by Alan Hilton, now has the ability to receive and renew the SPO training records, or review the SPO training records for all HDOT employees in LMS. So that's a really great thing. Having taken the LMS training myself on LMS because I wanted to see how well it works and whether, it's something that people can just leave on and, continue to walk away and not take part in. I personally took the classes and am very pleased with the training because you need to take notes. I mean, you can't just keep it on and not listen. You have to take notes. There's a test at the end of each training, which I find, which I found even challenging myself if notes are not properly taken, and if an employee is not actively listening. So that's a really good thing. Next slide. Until employees complete the mandatory training pursuant to HRS 103D and 103F, such employees are precluded from being delegated procurement authority. Referenced as attachment B in the documentation that we provided to you, you'll find DOT's procurement delegation effective, you'll see it effective January 25th, 19. For airports division specifically, there are a total of 161 airports employees with currently delegated procurement authorities. Okay, and if you'd like, we can provide you this lengthier log listing of each of the 161 airports employees. It's not included in the attachments we provided, but if you want, we can provide you this lengthier log. Next slide, Ross. So out of the 161 airports employees who have some level of procurement authority, whether it be small purchases, developing, drafting a solicitation, reviewing, approving, conducting, managing, or administering the procurement or contract. The airport employees who are included in what has been submitted to your committee and is marked as attachment C have procurement officer delegation on their SPO 036 form. Procurement officer is defined in procurement delegation memo dated in December of 2014 as any person with the delegated authority to enter into and administer contracts or make written determination and with respect thereto. The term includes an authorized representative acting within the limits of authority. The delegated authority is received by the Chief Procurement Officer directly or through the head of a purchasing agency. In order to be considered a procurement officer, various trainings are required, including competitive sealed bidding, competitive sealed proposals, professional services, small purchases training, sole source, and emergency training. Once an employee completes the training, and only until the employee completes the training, does the person have procurement authority rights. People with procurement authority, it's not a one-time training. They need to undergo retraining every 5 years, as well as ethics and compliance training every 3 years. And those who are determined to have been associated with a procurement violation of any sort also have to undergo additional training. Our procurement violation retraining memos suspend employees' delegation until specified training is completed and directs employees to complete within a short period of time, like I think 30 days. If they complete sooner, procurement delegation is restored at that time. So that's it for training, unless you have any questions, but if you don't, I'd like to turn this,
I think
I'm sorry.
we might have questions on the training because
Oh,
it's so
sure.
important, training and certification, and especially when you mentioned that there are violations and the employee is restricted in the delegation if there are violations. How many have there been, and what kinds of violations, or not so much the what kinds, but how many in, say, the last couple of years? And who monitors to know there's a violation?
What I'll do, Chair, I don't have that specific data in front of me right now, but I'm gonna be chatting with staff right now. And as soon as I get that information, I can alert you via chat with that information, if that's okay.
Thank you. Yes, that'll be fine.
Thank you.
We don't want the information on chat, we want the information live. once
No,
you
yeah,
get it.
just send it, they can send it. Or are
I'll
they
alert
here?
you
Are they
that-
available to answer that question? Or we will have follow-up questions after this briefing as well. But if someone is available to answer that, that would be fine as well.
What I can do is, rather than, in case someone is talking and I have that information, I can alert staff via chat that I have that information so that you can ask me at a later time, and I'll have that information to be able to provide to you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Senator Kim.
You talked about retraining, and every 5 years for, what was that again, and every 3 years for ethics?
Yes, ethics and compliance training is every 3 years, and retraining of the procurement classes that are required for that specific level of procurement authority is every 5 years.
Okay, and so I'm looking at this chart, and I see some of these that are later than 5 years. So what happens if they don't take it within 5 years?
They are precluded from, well, actually, they have until, there are some who need to be retrained this year, but they have until end of this calendar year to complete the training.
Okay, because I see one here, it says class taken on 2014.
I have I'm not sure, I have the most updated list, which I thoroughly reviewed before this presentation, and if necessary, we can provide you with an updated log with everyone's updated dates, if that, what you have is not the most accurate version that we have.
Well, you gave it to us, so I would assume you would have checked it before giving whether it's updated or not.
Well, let me compare it with what I have, and I'll forward to you what I'm referencing.
Senator Kim is talking about handout C that we got yesterday, which has a number of.
Yeah. So if they haven't had it, then the delegation is withdrawn until they get the update? And who monitors that?
The Business Management Office, Senator, manages that list and sends written communication to that specific office, as well as, I think, Deputy Director for that division, notifying them that the employee needs to be retrained.
Okay, because I noticed, like, let's just take Rossi Gashi, for instance. It says authorized on 2014 on procurement exemptions, authorized 2014 for small purchases. Doesn't say when the training. It's SNF in 2015, so. And I don't see any dates for Jade or I guess for yourself. I don't see any dates.
So I guess this is a question on the director and the deputy directors, if they are designated as chief procurement officers, have they been through training? I think that, Lynn, you're saying you went through it, but is that consistently done across, especially those that are the designated as chief procurement, that they need to make the ultimate decision? Have they been through training?
Yeah, I'm current, Senator. We usually give ample time before the like usually the end of the year when we tell them that they gotta take the training. And I don't think that that log is updated because I've taken mine last year.
Okay, well, I'm just basing it off what you folks gave us, so if you don't give us
Actually,
updated information, we're gonna be speaking from what you gave us.
Senator, if I may interject, your questions are very valid. What is noted in Exhibit C or Attachment C is the date of authorization, not the date as to when they were last retrained.
Can we
So
have
for-
information
you
then,
have-
Lynn, on when they were trained? Because I thought
Sure.
they had to be trained before they were authorized. I think that's what you said a little earlier, that they
Right, so
can't get
when
the
they were
authorization.
initially, like, for example, if you look at mine, I started in January. I was authorized on the 26th of February of 2019. I was not authorized when I started because between the time I started and when I was authorized, I had to undergo the training. So when the date, which is the date of authorization, that's when I was first authorized to have that procurement authority, if that answers your question.
Okay, but you also have on following pages for others, class taken. Class taken on 2014, they were authorized on 2017, so I don't know, 3 years went by before they get authorized from the class, and yet when do they then take the next class? From the date the class was taken, or from the date of the authorization?
The date of, I'm sorry, what was your question? I'm sorry?
Okay,
Because,
so let's look on page 3. Let's just look on Robin Shishido. Okay, it says here, authorized for procurement exemption, authorized on 7/13/17, but the class was taken on 2014.
That's the, Lynn, that's the date, or Senator Kim, that's the different categories. So one is small purchases, one is procurement exemption, the other one is professional services, and so on.
Yes, so what does that have to do with it? Don't you have to take training in all of those?
Yeah, so in the case of Robin Shishido, I think what the chart is showing is that he was authorized to do small purchases on July 27, 2018. For procurement exemptions to 103D, it was the date that you see there.
Right, but the class was taken on 2014. So my question, in line with retraining every 5 years, or with the small ethics every 3 years, is it from the date the class was taken or the date of the authorization?
That's a good question. I think then we got to go check with our business section to see what this chart is trying to, I guess, portray.
what I can do, Deputy Director Higashi, as well as Chair and Senators, what I can do is provide you with the recurring training spreadsheet, which is a separate document from Exhibits Handout C, which has all of the dates as to what classes they undertook, when they need to take
Now, can you
a
just answer the
retraining by.
question? Is it based on the date they took the class, the 5 years calendar, or is it based on authorization?
Senator, I think it would be based on authorization because they would need to provide confirmation that they took the class, or we need to confirm that they actually completed the class.
Yeah, but Jane, in the case that they took the class 3 years before they got authorized, things change. So if you have a time between, years that go by before they get authorized from the time they took the class, by the time the next class comes up, they're gonna be, 8 years, 9 years, 10 years? Again, I'm just basing it on what you guys gave us and what you're telling us.
I think the question is, what, in terms of the training, because we're looking at training as being really important so that your staff that touch the contracts or do procurement really are trained and can consistently apply the law. So if the law changes, is there any kind of renewal or retraining that is required. But the question that Senator Kim has is that if you take the training, but you don't get authorized 3 years later, there's a lot of change in between. So do you do a retraining? And how do you folks determine whether to authorize a person who has gone through training or not, and keep in touch with what's happening with the changes in law, perhaps? So it's not clear from the chart that you gave us how you're using the training to authorize the procurement officers.
Go ahead.
No, what we can provide to you to, I think, satisfy your needs is the more detailed spreadsheet of every single employee within airports who has procurement, some type of procurement delegation, along with the training records and the dates of everything.
I don't think you have to go through that, that much extra work. I think we're asking the question, what information you provided, when a person is trained and certified, that somebody monitors that to say this person is now trained and can do the job, and so now we authorize them. Then when after that, 3 years or 5 years, or annually, if the law changes, they're re-certified. They go through some training, or at least update in the law that they can apply consistently throughout your department. That's the question, not necessarily that we need to have any more than the listing of all your procurement officers and that they've been authorized. But again, the authorization should follow that they have knowledge and they can apply the law correctly and consistently. So that's what we're looking for, not necessarily another spreadsheet.
Yes, Chair. So in response to that question, the Business Management Office closely monitors and monitors the training, their ability to, based on their records, whether they make the determination whether the person has sufficient knowledge and training to be given that procurement authority level.
So your business service or your business management office then oversees all of the divisions of the department and collects that and monitors that to make sure that every person who's authorized has been trained or retrained and keeps track of that as well on an ongoing basis. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes.
So again, going back to the violations, if somebody has been involved in a violation of the law, you're saying that their authorization or delegated authority has been revoked. Is this business management office also the office that will monitor and revoke and reinstate based on some criteria?
Yes.
Okay, could we have the criteria on what is being done when they do violate? How do you assess that, and what do you do to reinstate or keep a person off of authorization?
Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Kim, you had a question.
No, I guess I'm just looking at the charts and, like on Annabelle Clark, she was authorized for procurement exemption, but her class was taken on 2008. With no other information. So I would assume that she's had updated training, it's just that you're not giving it to us? Is that correct?
The recurring training spreadsheet is a separate document.
Okay.
So, what we can do is forward it to you via email so that you can quickly access it. And should you have any other questions upon your review, I'm more than open to answering them at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. So we could move on to your presentation. Is it Ross or Director? Or Lynn?
Yeah, so we're gonna move on to the next section. We're gonna be turning this over to our engineering manager, Guy Ichinotsubo. Guy, you wanna come over here? We're all in one room, so we just have a chair that's in front of the camera. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, Chair, members of the committee. As Ross mentioned, my name is Guy Chinatsubo, and I am the Engineering Program Manager for the Airports Division. So the following slides that will be shown outlines our department's current procurement process. And there are 4 types of delivery methods. One is for competitive sealed bidding. The next one is for request for proposals for design build projects. And we have 2 examples of professional services and also professional services for IDIQ contracts. So these flow charts are similar to what was presented by our Highways Division previously. There are a few differences in the steps and the durations based upon the operational differences between airports and highways, as well as the project complexities when they exist. So I won't go through each flow chart step by step, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Can you just go over really briefly, Guy, so that we can see the difference between your procedures on whether it's competitive bidding or IDIQ, some of those, so that what are the differences? And again, in terms of how quickly you can get through the process, but consistent application so that we follow the 103D. Let's see if you can start with your flow chart, just quickly going through it. And the time it takes.
Okay, so our competitive sealed bidding is pretty much similar to what our highways department process is. We do have some, like one difference is the first box, the advertisement. Airports right now primarily advertises through our contracts office, and we don't do any advertising on Hawai'i Pro. And our minimum advertising date is 30 calendar days versus the 21 calendar days. And that's just because of we follow our federal requirements. So even though it's a state project, we still advertise for the minimum 30 calendar days. We also, after we make an award, or before we make the award, we need to get FAA concurrence if it's a federal funded project. And that adds some time to our flowchart process. So right now the total shows 72 to 108 calendar days, but again the durations could change depending on the complexity of the project.
Sharon, see if they can update the PowerPoint. Can they update the PowerPoint and include the timeline on it?
Oh, yes. Could you update your PowerPoint presentation to show us how much time between the boxes? You say you have 72 to 108 calendar days, but sort of an estimate of each of those phases in your process.
Okay, so you want to update it?
Yes. How long does it take? Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The other thing is, we've heard that, the better bid going out is a better and clear scope of work before you start advertising for the project. So I don't see that in your flow chart, but there must be some process before you go out to advertise. And could you add that to this and how much time that takes before you go out to advertise your project?
I have a question.
Okay, so you want to add our planning and design?
Yes, yeah, because that's a whole process, right? I mean,
Okay.
unless you do that on the front end, you could have you could have an award that doesn't meet what your specs are or what your intent is in the project.
Okay, we can add that.
Yeah, thank you. Senator De La Cruz has a question.
Well, first of all, how many people are part of the bid evaluation?
For our construction project is usually our project manager. They're the ones who reviews the bids. They look at all the verify the contractor has their license, looks through the bid tabs for each of the.
So is that the
bidder.
same team the bid evaluation and whoever awards?
Yes, it's pretty much just the project manager.
So
and
one
one
person.
Yes.
Project manager is
One
on the
person.
selection committee?
There's no committee, Guy?
There's no committee for competitive sealed bidding. This is based on low bid by contractors. So once the bids are submitted to our contracts office, after the bids are open and read, then we get the bid documents and our project manager compiles the bid tabulation of all the bids.
Okay, so how many times do you use this process versus where you have a committee?
On RFP is
RFP.
committee.
RFP,
Oh, that's the next one.
yeah, I think RFP.
Okay. So you know when you guys do this process, the bid solicitation and awards with the low bid, how often do you have a chart of what the original cost of the project was and how many change orders or change of scope you ended up having going through this process?
We do have the original contract bid, and we do have documentation of all our change orders and what the change orders costs are. And at the end, we do have a total of the final project cost.
Did you submit that to us, Guy? I know I saw some change order information that you sent, but I don't know if we had the actual
Yeah, but-
amount at the end of the project. Some do.
Yeah, we didn't include any project costs or specific project costs in the presentation. But are you interested in a specific project or
Well,
just in
No,
general?
no, we want to see that the cost from what the award originally was supposed to be, then how many change orders and what the project ended up costing us.
Right, so is it for specific projects or all projects?
Can you
or-
give us the projects?
Yeah, we have some of the information. No, we're looking at.
Across the board.
Across the board. So we're looking at procedures and process and, your awarding. So if, the question is, if you start off with the lowest bid and you have 20 change orders, what is the cost of that contract at the end compared to when you first got the low bid, i.e. change orders have increased the cost of the project.
Yeah.
So that's what we're looking at is, what is your tally of that?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
you gotta get
all of
closer and just get us the last 5 years.
Last 5 years?
Yes, Guy? Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
So going back to what the chair asked on your pre-design and design. I'm not sure how often maybe the pre-design and design phase maybe was inadequate, and where that also ended up doing change orders or having change of scope because the design was not properly vetted.
that does sometimes result in change of scope, but we do have a process where we develop a project definition report involving all the stakeholders, trying to get their operational and functional requirements for the project. And we come up with a scope and our cost estimate that we have the airlines concur to the scope and the budget. And that is what we,
Okay, so can you give me an example of one?
okay, so, say just the Malta concourse, for instance, there was a project definition report that was prepared with our costs, estimated costs, and that is what we are designing towards. Sometimes it's hard for our stakeholders to easily visualize what the project will end up looking at or looking like when it's completed. So most of our change orders, is due to unforeseen site conditions, whether there's utility conflicts.
No, but that's
contaminated-
different. That's different because we've been through that with other departments. What we're trying, there's two change orders versus change of scope, and because the design or the pre-design phase was inadequate, the design was not thoroughly vetted. People were either rushing or you had the wrong people there. So now you have to change the scope to compensate for a poor design, which is also going to cost us money. So I want to see the differences between the change of scope because of poor design or inadequate design, and just the typical change order where, you know, you didn't know there was an electrical wire there, or you didn't know that there was a pipe there. So that's reasonable. But when do you guys separate the two, and how do you track the differences?
Yeah, so our change orders, you know, is usually either unforeseen site conditions or stakeholder requested change, or by design errors. So again, most of our change orders are attributed to unforeseen site conditions and owner stakeholder requested changes. There are some changes that's a result of design errors, but typically on a normal project, we usually account between 1% to 2% of the total change orders.
Okay, so that's what you guys call it, design errors.
Correct.
And you're saying it only happens how often?
I think on every project, you know, there are some change orders that, you know, will be attributed to design errors.
So Ross,
Yep.
why do you allow that to continue if that's a pattern?
Well, I think, Senator, and I think from the architects engineering group, you know, they will say that there's no such thing as a set of perfect plans and specs. And in a contract, when we try to make it kind of put us sticking it to them for design errors, you know, their attorneys will always come back and change the language to make it such that it's designed in accordance to normal engineering standards.
Yeah, but if it's a pattern, what are you guys gonna do to fix it? So if you guys can just maybe comply with what the chair's requesting, and as you label all the different change orders as a result of the different things you talked about, including design errors, how many times did that occur and how much did it cost us?
This is all the project of 100,000.
Okay, we can provide that.
Yeah, and you know, the thing is, what I don't understand, when all departments come ahead and talk about unforeseen electrical and utilities, yeah? So when you guys get the project, you guys don't go out there and hire a company to do zoning, so you guys can kind of find out where is possible water lines, electrical lines is, because it's sometimes you guys don't have it on the map, and you guys don't have a company going out to the area to try to make sure that you guys not hitting on that. Because, you know, I worked on some construction sites in the boondocks, and they used to have companies to come and tone the property to let us know that there might be old utility lines, old water lines, old sewer lines, or active. You guys have a company go out there and a company to go look these unforeseen problems, or you guys just go with them blind?
Well, we usually have our base files, our base maps, off of our base files that we keep our as-built drawings on. But a lot of the as-builts and utility lines, you know, are not that accurate. But we don't usually have a contractor or someone come out to tone the utility lines during the design process.
Okay, but why? Because you guys talking about, you guys have maps and everything like that. Maps do get outdated. You get stuff that is put in there unforeseen. Would you think it would be more cost effective if you guys would find these utility lines instead of changing order or unforeseen problems or other things like that? I mean, that's basically what it is. And then, isn't it part of being safety in case you hit one big high powered line and somebody will get electrocuted and die? Isn't that better if you get an area that you go and you know that you don't have the accurate maps to have somebody go in there and kind of like check it out, make sure that the utilities is where it say it is, instead of start digging up something and then something break, and then it costs the state and county, and even the person's safety.
Right, so I think for projects like that's built on undeveloped area or open areas like our Mapa concourse or even our consolidated rent-a-car facility, that's something that should have been done, could have been done. But things that we renovate existing buildings, we don't usually go in and, cut holes in the wall to verify the utilities within the wall or above the ceilings.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about existing building. I'm talking about exactly what you're saying. When you go into a site that is already ready for build on the site, right? And you gotta dig up the land and everything like that. Don't you guys, I'm not talking to go in and cut holes in the building. I mean, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, if you guys maps are wrong for the building, that is fine. But I'm talking about when you're starting the construction and there's nothing there, and then you get maps saying that the utilities should be on the left side of the property, but then you find out the utilities in the middle as soon as you start digging. So that would be a foresee vision if you had somebody told the property. That's what I'm saying, because right now, all the divisions are telling us the same thing. Unforeseen, water, electric, utilities, sewer, all that. But it's not unforeseen. If the property is ready for dig, you can send a company out there to tone it. Go out there and find out if that utility line is on the left of the property and not in the middle of the property when you start digging. Because that's the same thing what happened over here when you run over our utility lines and our water line, and we never find out nothing until everything started dying and the electricity couldn't come on because nobody told the property. But that's something that the state and the city continue to do. They go out there and the contractor don't look for the utilities, and then we get this kind of problem, and then we gotta pay Paul's Electric $50,000 just to go move one pipe because of an utility line because it wasn't foreseen and it wasn't in the plan.
Right, I understand. So, we don't do that during the design, but before the contractor starts their construction for like the Mapa concourse and the consolidated rent-a-car facility, the contractor did tone the subsurface. And that's how we found out that there's some utility conflicts.
Thank you. Senator Kim?
Yeah, I have a question. So what's the dollar amount that triggers the full-on procurement? Is there a certain amount that you go without having to go through, we can just do sole source, or I forget?
All of our construction, we do competitive sealed bidding.
From what,
regardless.
doesn't matter what the cost is? Construction is
Yeah.
all?
Yes.
Okay, and so what's the other one?
The consultants.
Well, we have the request for proposals for a design build.
Is
so
that,
this one-
is there a threshold for dollar amount?
No,
Where's the threshold? Is it in small purchases? Where's the threshold?
Senator, this is Jay. Sole source is 4,000.
Sole source is 4,000.
So 4,000.
Is that just goods? Is that just goods then?
Services?
Services?
Yeah, it's just goods. Yeah, services, that wouldn't be enough.
Wait, 4,000 is the trigger for you to then go to sole source, or below or above?
No, then they have to go to bid. Right? Anything over 4,000, you go to bid. You got to get 3 bids or whatever.
well, I'm usually involved in our special maintenance or capital improvement projects. So all of our projects that we put out are all competitive sealed bids.
You're all competitive still. Okay, which ones have like a $50,000
Small purchase.
threshold or whatever? I mean,
Hi, Senators. This is Bonnie. May I answer that question?
yes, please.
Okay, so there are various thresholds.
I'm
Small
sorry?
purchases,
Bonnie, can you go closer to the mic? We can kind of, a difficult time hearing you.
okay, let me see. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep,
Okay,
okay.
so.
Sorry, cut off for a little while. What we can do is we can provide you a list of our methods of procurement for small purchases. There's ones that we will do for under 5,000. There's another one from 5,000 to 15,000 and so forth. So we have different thresholds for different types of purchase costs. So we can provide you this, we have a summary sheet that we utilize for our division.
Okay, thank
Bonnie-
you.
Senator.
Bonnie,
Bonnie, what were you saying?
Okay, so similar to what Ross is saying, we do provide guidance to all departments. Small purchase threshold for goods and services is 100,000. For construction, it's 250,000. And we do have procurement circulars that tell agencies under 5,000, they have reasonable and adequate competition. Under 15,000, for small purchases, they must get a minimum of 3 quotes. 15 to 100,000, they have to use our electronic procurement system.
Can you submit that to us, Bonnie, please? And so going back to airports, so but under construction, you folks don't have the $250,000 limit? Guy, you guys just do it no matter what the cost is? You go to,
Most of our projects are over 250,000.
okay. What I'm trying to get at is, I recall where airports especially would have smaller projects and they would award it and then they would keep adding to it and they would never close it. And I'm looking at some of your projects and I see they've been open since 2011, 2007, 2005, 2003. So do you folks?
Do we know which projects those are? Because we have been making a conscious effort to close out our older contracts.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Do we have those specific projects that's been open for those period of time? Because we have been making a conscious effort to close out our projects over 5 years old.
Okay, so you folks you're not doing that practice where you folks would do it for 49,000 or 200,000 and add on so that you can avoid the procurement?
From the engineering side, not that I'm aware of, again, because most of our projects are over $250,000, so we all go on the competitive field bidding.
Okay, so what about the others though?
I'm not sure about the others.
Well, anything to do with going over those thresholds, Bonnie, you can chime in, but that will be considered partially
Right,
with a
right.
12-month period.
Yeah.
Which airports used to do a lot of way back. I just not, you know.
Yeah, we cleaned it up via an investigation back about 20 years ago.
Okay, so we're not doing, you guys aren't doing that anymore.
Well, if it is doing, if it does occur, that is considered fraud from the procurement system.
Okay, so in the case of the Hawaiian Airlines maintenance facility, how many change orders did that project have before it got shut down?
I do not have the information at this time. But that would be one of the requested items to follow up on.
Okay, because I know that when they went through to check up on it, there were like 500 discrepancies. But even prior to that, I was wondering how many change orders had actually occurred, and at what point is the project manager manages these projects? Because you folks hire a consultant for every major project, don't you?
Yes, we hire a consultant construction manager,
So you hire a consultant project manager,
construction manager.
construction manager.
Right, to oversee the construction and inspection of the project.
Okay, and who oversees the construction manager?
A state project manager is assigned to the project.
Okay, so in the case of the Hawaiian Airlines, and I'm using that because I'm familiar with it, right, and picking another project. So you hired the consultant, I forget who it was, Suzuki,
They are Segal.
yeah, Segal. And so they're paid millions to oversee the project, and they're the ones that authorized the state to pay, right?
Yes.
Pay the
Or
bills.
they recommended payment to be
Right.
made.
And the state paid 85% to DCK, and then DCK, all that stuff happened, and we had to go to take them to court. But we never took to court the consultant, which I was told you guys needed them to testify. So what happened to the project manager? What was the project manager's role?
Project manager's role is to oversee the construction manager, their contracts.
Right, so what happened in that case? Because obviously, the consultant, the construction manager didn't do their job, right? They authorized all these payments for work that had discrepancies, work that was bad. They had change orders, they ordered electric doors, but they didn't have the conduits, and the subcontractors weren't getting paid. And so the project manager that was supposed to oversee the construction manager, right?
Yes, but this particular project was a design build, and there were questions about whether or not the design plans was ever approved for construction.
Well, whose responsibility was that?
Well, it's the state's responsibility, but given
Yeah, but who in the state? Who is responsible for that? Who in your folks' office is responsible? The engineer? The deputy? Who?
I guess ultimately it will be me as an engineering program manager.
So it would have been you.
Yes, because all the project managers, ultimately come under me.
And you didn't know whether or not the design was what? What did you say?
Design error.
Design error.
Was approved for construction.
Okay, how come you didn't know that?
Well, the project manager is basically overseeing the project, so I don't get involved in the day-to-day of the projects.
But then okay, the point I'm making is, somewhere along the line, there's a disconnect, right? So if that's not your responsibility, but you're supposed to oversee, or if it's the project manager's responsibility to oversee the consultant, or the consultant who we pay millions of dollars for, I mean, who's responsible? Yet the only people that got any kind of reprimand or whatever, or any penalties, was DCK. Because the consultant got their money and they were free and clear. The project manager went on to another job. Nobody got any consequences, right?
Well, I guess the CM, did have to pay up some money as part of the settlement.
I'm sorry?
The CM did have to pay some money as part of the settlement negotiations, but being that the project is still under litigation, I'm not sure how much I can
Okay,
disclose it.
I don't want to know specifically. My point is, if that is the basic process for procurement and running your construction projects, then there's problems, because if you're not holding the consultant accountable for giving you folks wrong information, or not overseeing the design, or overseeing the work, and if the project manager is not overseeing the construction manager, and if you're not overseeing the project manager, and there's no checks and balances, then no wonder we have these problems.
Well, I think this is, this is a anomaly project. It's not a typical reflection of what we do at the airports.
Okay, then
this
let me
is-
bring up another one then. Ted's Wiring, went 9 years, they never delivered a project. Who is responsible for that? So when you say it's not typical, I don't think that's true. And those are the only ones that we know about.
I cannot speak for Ted's Wiring, that was before my time, so I don't know the information on that project.
Senator, I'm not trying to be defensive, but we do have other projects that, they're not noted for being deficient in this case, which you had brought up about Ted's Wiring and also the DCK project on the Hawaiian Airlines hangar. But other projects such as the Conrail facilities and the Mauka Concourse, those are large, multi-million-dollar projects that have done well as far as the procurement process and the contract itself. So I guess, I'm not trying to be defensive, but yeah, I understand your concerns.
Okay, but Ross, who did those? So is it problematic where in certain areas of those divisions there seems to be a pattern of the kind of things they're talking about, and in other areas maybe they have their act together? So who ultimately oversees the guys that need help getting it on track?
Well, like Guy said earlier, it's the program manager for engineering when it comes to these large projects.
But you don't, when does it get to your desk where you say, hey, you guys, we better look at this before
We
it gets...
did. We did look at the Ted's Wiring contract, and we did go to court for the DCK contract. It's in litigation, as Guy
Yeah,
noted.
but that's almost after the fact,
Yeah,
Ross.
yeah.
You didn't look into Ted's Wiring until I brought it up. 9 years later.
Mm.
And DCK didn't come up until DCK wasn't paying the subs and all that stuff happened.
Understand.
So it's easy to say after the
wanted-
fact, but,
Yeah,
you
but
know.
I just wanted to note other projects that have gone well.
Well,
and
what about the
did-
FAST project? That's another one that was problematic. They kept never passing the test. I don't know who was responsible for that. So you're making me go back and dig all these projects up when you tell me that, those anomalies.
The FAST project was a highways project, I believe. Jade, you can comment on that if you need be.
Okay, you don't have to go into it. I'm just bringing up but
Right,
the
understood.
thing is, these are
Understand your point
procurement
of oversight.
projects.
Yes.
So is there any kind of consequences to the project manager or to the consultant should there be these kinds of problems?
I would say the consequence would be in future contracts or types of work that they would be doing with us. Those would be considered, when selecting consultants in the future.
So how many contracts did the consultant for DCK get after that?
Zero.
And how many more jobs did Ted's Wiring get? Plenty, I know.
But Ted's Wiring would have gotten jobs based on competitive sealed bidding. But regarding the consultant, they have been selected for other projects after, but again,
Okay, see, so don't give me that kind of answers when you know that doesn't hold true. We need to put
Yeah.
stuff into the procurement process to make sure that there's checks and balances and there's consequences. Because there's no consequence, then it's going to happen again, and it might not happen on a regular basis on every project, but for every 10th project that it might happen, or every 12th project that it might happen, and then it costs the states a lot of money, and you have these same infractions and no consequences.
understand.
Yeah, if your pay had to be deducted every time you ran into this stuff, people would be a little bit more careful or diligent about overseeing stuff, right?
Yes, I understand.
Just as a follow-on, do you evaluate your contractors? So if in fact we have these kinds of problems, this is one of the bills that we passed, the governor signed, in terms of evaluating performance of contractors. But do you do that currently? And if in fact you're looking at responsible bidder, that should be in the mix before you say this is the lowest bid, and just not take the amount. Or do you do that or not?
We do not evaluate past performance on contractors. I don't believe that we can unless it's a request for proposal. So competitive sealed bids is just based on the lowest responsive contractor.
So you don't consider responsible as being able to do a job and to do it within the budget or the scope that you send out? You just take it as the lowest bidder? I think that's the problem. Yeah, that is.
Competitive sealed bids, yes. And I agree, that is a problem.
So what's the fix?
So that's what we're looking for, this committee, is what is the fix? How can we address these problems? Because we're getting junk jobs performed by junk contractors without, us knowing how do we prevent that in the future? Because we're just wasting taxpayer money if we don't have a good job and have performance. So what is the fix? I mean, what do you suggest that we do to correct that kind of problem? Because that's big bucks that we're spending and we're not getting what we have intended to get.
Well, for request for proposals for design build, past performance is a factor that's evaluated. But I think what's different from the flow chart that's shown on the screen right now is that for airports, because of the concern of getting protests, we do not do a step 2, but we do include price as part of the evaluation process along with past performance. But I think the fix is to do more requests for proposals, have past performance as part of the evaluation factor. But the drawback for that is that whoever is not selected will protest. And if we select someone who wasn't the low bidder, then they're going to be calling you guys, they're going to be calling the media and saying that, airports, they're wasting millions of dollars because they awarded the contract to the second bidder when our bid was, X million dollars lower and we could provide the same service.
Yeah, but you see, the problem is the contractors, the guy Ted's Electric, and all these other contractors, they already know they can go on the low bid. Later on, they're going to get a premium price because they're going to continue to jack the airport. But they know, again, we get deep pockets. So this is what Senator Dem is saying. Regardless if I give it to the second guy. So if Ted's came back and he protested the bid, I'm going to say, bro, you did shitty work. Excuse my language. But you know what I mean? We still be going back and forth with all of this money we're talking about. And we say, oh, wow, they're going to call you guys to grumble. Well, they have no foot to stand on if they're doing poor work, poor quality work. It's going over and over again, and especially at the airport, we need to tighten it up. So that's the reason why, I mean, we talk about this over and over. But you guys, the part we got to change is this low bidding and this quality work here. I don't care if you're a low bidder. You just screw us up with the last few contracts that you got. You're gone. So we're not going to hold nobody accountable. We're going to keep getting the guy who's the most crappiest contractor because he's the low bidder, and we're afraid that he's going to protest and going to cost the project money, and he go to the media. But definitely I'll put him in the media and say, hey, you know what? Go to the media. I'm going to tell him how junky the job is and how much he was ripping off the state. They know already. This is around and around these contractors. They know. They're not stupid. I mean, for stuff that they're doing and changing orders, like to move a rock because they got to put an electrical line in and charging the state $100,000 for moving a rock. You give me 50,000, I move it with my hand. That's the kind of change orders you guys get going on. You know what I mean? You give me 50,000, I go over there, I move it by myself. I don't need a machine. You know what I mean? But that's the kind, they know they're gonna get away with it because we get deep pockets like you just said. You guys just said earlier, no matter what, you guys are gonna continue with the project.
Yeah.
So there's no checks and balances.
So
Okay.
Senator Kim has a question.
Okay, let me go back to what you just said. You said that you don't do requests for proposals because if it goes to the second bidder, they're gonna come complain to us? Is that what you said? You don't like to do that because of that?
Yes, they're going to complain to the media and to the.
Yeah,
to the
but that's the process as far as requests for proposals. You're not the first to do it. How many requests for proposals we have?
Yeah.
And that it's based on the criteria. And if your criteria is sound, if your evaluation team is sound, and they award it according to what is in the request for proposal, then there's no foot for the protest. And we passed that protest law that shortened it, plus it took you lose the bond if you don't prevail. But again, a lot of times the protest is because the way the request for proposals are written, it requires a license, find out that they don't have a license. I've been part of that protest. I've sat in those kinds of protests. Protests, you've had one recently with your baggage regarding the license. So those are legitimate protests based on you folks' process, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't have a good solid proposal and you don't have a good solid team and a good criteria, then you are going to have protests. I don't care what. Right?
Yes, that's correct.
So that's no reason why you wouldn't go to request for proposals.
If I can chime in, Bonnie, this is Ross, yeah. There's a procurement circular that was issued out on August 9th, 2021, circular number 2022-03. And it speaks about the House Bill 526, also was signed into law in addition to Senate Bill 1329. And it goes into, I guess, requirements for past performance. So this is something that we need to abide by law that was passed in this last session. So this is what we're talking about. I believe the topic about past performance and contractors ripping us off and so forth. So these are the things that our team needs to take into consideration for upcoming contracts regarding past performance. Thank you.
Okay, but what about past performance for consultants? What about?
That would be, is that under?
That's professional services.
Art and law, right? Yeah.
And that's based on part of the evaluation factor for professional services.
Yeah, but again, so you have it was Segawa, right? Was it Segawa for the
Yes.
maintenance facility? So in that case, they weren't cited for anything. They were asked to go to court against DCK, from what I understood. And you folks didn't cite them for anything, even though they were responsible for telling you guys to pay when the job wasn't done properly or done completely. So how would that be evaluated? Or how would they be held accountable?
Yeah, I mean, again, the professional services are evaluated. Past performance is taken into account, and on certain solicitations, selection or the ranking is made based on whatever firms submit. And sometimes, there could be minimum of 3. Sometimes there could be over 10. So it just depends on the situation or the number of firms who submit for a particular project.
Is there such a thing as a clawback I don't know if that's the right word, where you can go back and charge I don't know if it's a vendor or a consultant, like up to 10%? Bonnie, is there something like that? That was brought to my attention. I can't remember exactly.
I am not aware of it.
Where if you find, if you
Oh,
find,
sorry,
if you find fault or whatever, that you can go back, but you can only take up to 10% of the contract, or?
Well, we do have retainage that we withhold.
I'm
from
sorry?
the We do have a retainage that we withhold from the contract.
No, that wasn't it. It was called a clawback. Okay, I gotta get back to you guys on that one. Sorry. Go
So-
ahead.
So to follow up on Senator Kim, so there's nothing, so if in fact a consultant is in error, whether it's a design error or otherwise, and they don't meet the scope that you awarded them for, and what do you do to the consultant? Is there, and I think that's what Senator Kim is talking about, is how do you get, assess them for the errors, because you're paying them to provide that kind of expertise to the project.
Yeah, so we do sometimes go after the design consultants for design errors, but that's kind of rare that we do. But again, I think on a typical project, change orders that's resulting from design errors, usually account for about 1 to 2% of the total change orders. So it just depends on the situation and the nature of the change where, we may decide to go after the design consultant to help pay for the change orders.
Is there something in your contract when you do actually execute the contract that says something about that, errors or omissions required? I mean, that the consultant then is charged for? Nothing like that in your contract?
We actually tried to put it into our contract, but then again, the consultants, attorneys that reviews the contract, they objected to those type of language. And, I think the language just says like design in accordance to industry standards, or because they know that there's no set of perfect plans and specs. So we tried, but they objected to that language.
So how can you assure that you'll get what you paid for if you don't have some kind of way to make the consultant do what they're getting paid for? What kind of language do you have in that contract to assure that?
Well, the consultants know that selection on future contracts is based on past performance. There's nothing really written in the contract itself.
So on a design consultant, so is there a way that if we're paying them X amount, say we're paying them $5 million to design something, and we find errors in the design, major areas, you cannot have something in the contract that says X amount of your contract, if we've locate or can show that it was a design error, not according to standards or whatever you can say, that we can recoup something back?
Again, we tried to put in a language, but they objected to that kind of language.
Because what?
Okay, then they don't get the job then.
Yeah, so
Then
you
we
go
move
to
on
another
somebody
consultant.
else, yeah.
Right, but I think any consultant, AE, architect, engineering firm, their attorneys would not have them sign a contract with that kind of language inside.
You know what the problem is? We're worrying about the contractor and the attorneys, and not worrying about the taxpayers and our money. See what I mean? So right now, all the senators, including Senator De La Cruz, everybody's saying that to try to put something like that in the written, and then you said they're not gonna take the job. Then Senator Kim said, well, we don't hire them then. But then you come back and then you say, attorney, see, we can't forgive you, we try to find checks and balances, but then you guys, well, not you guys, you people there is making excuses because the attorney said this. The attorney's not running our jobs, because our taxpayers paying for them. So tell attorneys if they get mistake, we look at proceeding from his law firm to take care of the bill then. You see what I mean? We're worried about what the attorneys is saying, but this might happen, and this person might do this, and the attorney might. You guys are worried about something in the future that might not even happen if we tell them straight, hey, this is what we're presenting for the taxpayers get for the money for their buck. If you can't go through that, we'll find somebody else.
I think what they're saying, Kurt, they're saying that nobody would take the job. Is that what you guys are saying, that no designer or architect will take the job?
I think their attorneys would advise them not to sign that kind of contract. But, you know, I'm all for having that kind of language in the contract. And, you know, when we solicit our professional services, you know, we can put it into that professional services. So everybody who submits their qualifications will know upfront that that's going to be a condition of the contract.
I think that also would be a deterrent for, and more careful performance by your contractors or your consultants if you do have that language in front, Guy.
Yeah, and if you have a specific amount that we can get back where it's not egregious or whatever, I mean, I'm sure we could find some way and some language to start along that line. Because I believe they said there's a 10% clawback, or I'm not sure, and then, but the 10% is not enough is what I've been told.
I think in the interest of, taxpayer dollars, I think we have to work on behalf of the interest of the public rather than the contractor's interest. And so there's a different approach that needs to be taken, I think, in the contracting so that we get good service on behalf of the taxpayers, as Senator Favela said,
Yeah,
Okay.
I totally agree, and we'll put this language in the solicitation. We'll try to see how the consultants respond.
Yeah.
That kind of brings up, I'm kind of jumping ahead in our presentation,
sure, please.
but kind of brings up the waiver for professional services. Right now, we need to have a minimum of 3 firms to submit for solicitation in order for us to make a selection. And if less than 3 firms do submit, then we either have to reduce or revise our scope and resolicit, or we have to try a different procurement method. And just plain devil's advocate, if we do have this kind of language and we get less than 3 firms to submit, then we won't be able to make a selection. And I think one of our recommendations for improvements is to reinstate the waiver that used to be there, where the director had the authority to continue with the award if there were less than 3 firms.
How often you have less than 3 firms?
Sometimes we have specialty procurements, like if we're going to go out and procure wiki buses, and we need a consultant to, prepare the specifications for the buses. Those type of specialty contracts, we do get less than 3 firms.
Again, how often does that happen?
We tried to procure buses twice, and both times we had less than 3 firms.
So it's only on the buses?
So far, that's in my experience, just with the buses. So I would just play devil's advocate, if we do put this kind of language in the solicitation, and if less than 3 firms do submit because they don't want to agree to that kind of language in the contract, then I'm just wondering.
Understood.
They give
Well,
us that, it just still.
Maybe instead of the waiver being so broad, it could be tailored, or it can say after 2 tries, if you don't get the 3rd, then you get a waiver, but shouldn't be right up front.
So how difficult is it to go out again to bid? I mean, I think this is a process and the time frame. If you need the buses and you have to go out again, how long would it take?
It doesn't take too long. Again, we advertise it for 30 calendar days, but, without changing, in this case, the language of having the consultants be responsible for design errors. Without changing the language, I don't think you're going to be getting any more consultants when you resolicit.
Right.
So I think if two consultants agree to this language, they're probably going to be the same two that's going to submit when you resolicit.
True. But that's different than the bus thing, right? The buses, it's not a design contract, so it would just
It
be
was a design
procurement of,
contract.
like,
It is design.
service. It is design?
Yes, it was
Oh.
a design to put together the bus specification.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah, I mean, like if,
Yeah.
we always say after the second time, or after the, if there are no, then you get a waiver.
Well, you
Right, so
could,
I think something like that would help us.
sure, if you can, look at your past experience and craft something that would be fair, but also not keep on doing the same thing if you get the same
Yeah,
result.
not across the board.
Yeah.
But for the buses though, isn't it, the design, have a lot of changes because of the feds? Making changes to the design more so than the actual person that's, designing it?
What?
But you guys have a lot of,
The
input
design.
from the regulations, from the transportation, from the feds, on how you guys operate, on the airport?
Contractor, and you give me one jump design, and I know later on.
Specifications kind of follow
Or
the,
if the RFP is bad.
yes,
So
but
that's right.
FTA.
We have to expose that part.
Yeah.
Okay, I got
Yeah,
something to
so-
that effect.
So just,
I'm not aware of any changes being made because of the federal changes.
Guy, just going back to your process, whether it's competitive bid or RFP, it's really important on the front end that you haven't included in your chart, which you will add in, but is that scoping the project and being really clear on your specs to begin with, so that you don't have all these change orders, or you don't have problems along the way. So can you add that in and tell us what that is in that process? You said the project manager goes through this whole process all the way through from procurement to execution of the contract. But do you use anybody else on that front end? Because if only the project manager is developing the scope, and then you see stakeholders at the end saying, oh, you don't have this in or that in, how do you work on that? And can you include that in your response to us, to this committee, because we're kind of nearing the end of the hour?
Yes, I will.
Yep, okay, Senator Kim has a
I have a
question.
couple of questions. Okay, so the time to protest, it's in 103D-701, that it must be filed in writing 5 days from the time the person known or should have known the facts, right?
Yes.
So this has also been interpreted in some cases to mean that any protest regarding the contents of the solicitation must be protested in 5 days after the solicitation have been published. Is that true? Do you folks use that 5 days for that as well?
No, we don't.
What is your days?
We usually have a cutoff date of when questions, request for information is due, and that's usually we try to make it 14 calendar days before bid opening. And that allows us a week to put together, to respond to those questions, respond to those requests for information, put together an addendum, and issue the addendum 7 calendar days, at least 7 calendar days before bid opening. So contractors would have, from the time of the project being advertised, to 14 calendar days prior to bid opening to question, protest the solicitation, or
Okay, so airports is 14 days.
Yes.
Okay.
14 days. prior
Bonnie,
to
is
the-
that consistent across the board? Because I'm being told some state contracts, procurement says 5 days.
Essentially, there's no specific requirement. It does say that the protest must be submitted prior to the opening of bids.
Okay, so they can use, an agency can use 5 days?
They could, yes, as long as the protest has to be submitted before the due date of bids.
Okay, because I think that's something, Madam Chair, we need to look at. Because I'm being told that some of these solicitations are 500 pages long. And so when they put it out, they say you only have 5 days, they gotta review this whole 500-page document within 5 days, which is unreasonable. I can see 14, or period before, so that's something, Bonnie, we need to look at, making it more consistent across the board. Because they're using 5 days protest on the back end, up on the front end, which I don't think it was intended for that.
Okay, so we also need to take a look at that. Right now, IFB's competitor seal bid only has a 10-day posting requirement. So we do need, if we're going to change one area, we will need to take a look at the posting requirement for competitive seal bids as well.
Okay, so if you can.
So there is a time frame. If we're going to have a specific time period, then just know that we will have to change the other section of the law
Okay.
that says minimum of 10 days.
Okay, and then once the protest goes to the hearing officer, the hearing officer's remedies are limited in 103D-706 and 707. And if the award has already been made, the hearing officer does not have the ability to award the contract to the prevailing party after the hearing. So they have to go back to a bid?
No, once the award has been made, a contractor could protest the award,
Right?
and then the protest process would start. And once the department issues the protest response, then that
Okay.
protester could request an admin hearing.
So they have to get an admin hearing to get the award.
So say like if contractor A was the low bidder and contractor B was awarded the project, then contractor A could protest the award to contractor B. The department would then come out with a protest response to contractor A's protest. And if contractor A does not agree with the protest response, then he would request an admin hearing. And the admin hearing, the officer, would either, agree with the department's protest response or override the.
Right, but if the hearing officers say that the department was wrong in giving it to contractor B, they cannot award it to contractor A.
They
right?
can. They can.
They can? I thought it says in 103D-706, 707, that their remedies are limited, that the hearing officer does not have the ability to award the contract to the prevailing party.
We just had a protest for that very same.
So you
scenario.
can? Okay, I just want to make sure, because I was told that's not happening. Okay, and you talked about the federal government and using some of their requirements because you're using federal funds. So the federal government has a statute that requires a contractor, prior to submitting a protest, to contact the contracting officer. And FAR 33-103 states that prior to submission of an agency protest, all parties shall use their best efforts to resolve concerns raised by an interested party at the contracting officer level through open and frank discussions. Hawaii does not have a similar statute or is not open, responsive to revising solicitations. Is that correct?
I'm not exactly clear on your question.
Well, my question is that the federal government has in their procurement process, in 33-103, prior to submission of an agency protest, all parties shall use best efforts to resolve concerns raised by an interested party at the contracting officer level. But that, we don't have that. We don't follow that similar.
Right, so, on all projects, regardless if it's federal funded or not, we follow that the contractor has 5 working days to file a protest from the time that they should have known.
Right, but do you folks do, instead of the protest, try to resolve it at the contractor officer level with the discussion prior to going into a protest?
No, we do not.
Is that something that we should have?
I'm not sure if that's something we should have, because I think contractors would just, just so they're on record, I think they would just follow the protest within that.
But they have it at the federal level, so if it works at the federal level, might it not work on the state level?
I'm not sure about that.
Okay, then can we look into that?
Bonnie, yeah, and Bonnie, do you have any response to that? Some of the federal statutes or rules on contracting of informal resolution before going to full-on protest?
We don't have, okay, so in an RFP method, there is a period of debriefing.
Can I hear you, Bonnie?
Bonnie, can you speak a little louder or into the mic, please? Hard to hear.
Okay, let me make this a little louder. Okay, so for RFPs, there is a period of debriefing in which the vendors can question why they were ranked the way they were ranked. There is not that process in IFB currently.
Should there be, Bonnie?
It could. Just keeping in mind that IFB was supposed to have been a faster process. These are all the requirements. You either meet them or you don't meet them. And
Yeah, but if
they
you
don't
get a
meet-
protest, it'll slow it up anyway, right?
Correct. So I mean, it's a possibility. It just will add more time
Let's look
at
at
the
that.
back end.
Okay, let's review it. And then finally, fees and costs. Allowing the prevailing petitioner to recover its fees and costs would encourage the procurement officer to resolve these types of issues at the protest stage. 103D-707 allows the wrongly awarded contractor to recover actual expenses other than attorney fees reasonably incurred under the contract, plus a reasonable profit. So that is that the process right now, that they cannot recover its costs and fees if they prevail?
That I'm not sure.
Bonnie, do we know?
I don't know in each case. I recall seeing on some of them that normally what I've seen DCCA hearings officer say is everybody has to
Pay their
bear
own, right?
costs.
Pay their own
Yes.
costs.
Pay their own costs.
So you think if we put in where they could recover their fees and costs, this might help resolve some of these issues?
I don't think, I think if they prevail and they get, so basically if they prevail, they get their costs back, whatever costs.
Right.
So again, are we adding to the cost of whatever project this is? We would need to weigh, the pros and cons of that, especially if there's multiple protests.
It might be difficult if it's adding to the cost.
Right, but I mean, again, if we awarding it, we're not writing a good proposal, we're awarding it to the wrong people, shouldn't that, then there be some consequences? Because this is very one-sided, right? The state writes the bid, the state awards it to the wrong party. There's all kinds of costs involved, and yet the state doesn't get penalized at all.
Okay. All right, we'll move on.
Okay.
That's something for more discussion with Bonnie, I think. Do you have anything more, Guy, the RFP, anything else? Any challenges you say you have and recommendations, Guy or Ross, Jay?
There's one on
Senator,
the,
this is Jay.
We have
This is
like 10
Jay.
minutes.
Yeah, I apologize for interrupting, but I would be negligent, if I did not thank Senator Kim for her help and support, when the past project was brought to her attention. The project was plagued by delays, design defects, failed tests, and shortage of skilled consultants. Our total recovery was about 32 million, and exceeds the invoices we paid. I think it was about 7 million. And, the consultant sued us for 17 million. And usually, DOT is the rich uncle, but in this instance, the money, is flowing in the right direction. And this is an example where we help vendors to account when they fail to comply with their contractual and professional obligations. And thank you again, Senator Kim.
you're welcome. We just need to be more proactive in going after that. I think sometimes we just want to cut our losses. There's one recommendation here on captive insurance, which is also something that I'm concerned about as well. So Ross, do you want to walk us through that one? Recommendation on captive insurance?
Well, I'm gonna let Guy, this
Oh.
is captive insurance was an issue, that we had with the contract that we had with the Hawaiian Airlines hangar. So
Right.
bottom line is that, a lot of times there's nothing left in the policy or in the, account. So it's hard for us to go after, the insurance performance, we would call it like a performance bond. So this is a method where it's self-funded by the own company, working on the project. So Guy, you want to kind of go into what really happened with this?
Okay, so I think captive insurance, as people may know, is kind of like being self-insured by a parent company. And I think captive insurance, it does provide some lower premiums for the contractor. And I think that's good, but I think the insurance companies need or should be vetted out more rigorously. And maybe if they can be vetted following the federal requirements, which they require that the surety company have 10 times, their capital and surplus is 10 times, at least 10 times the amount of their bonding ability. So for the DCK contract, being at $78 million, if we were to have followed the federal requirement, their surety company would have had to have at least $780 million in capital and surplus. But being that we went into litigation and after doing some research on DCK's captive insurance, they only had about $3 million in capital and surplus. So that would have only provided DCK with a bonding of $300,000. So being that subcontractors or contractors can't lien a state project, the only recourse they have for getting paid is through the payment bond. So I think if captive insurance is going to be allowed, then maybe if they could be vetted more rigorously, following the requirements, or just don't allow captive insurance as a surety and just have a requirement that it has to be a independent third-party bonding company.
So Guy, is this in the law now? And you can point us to what needs to be changed if in fact to allow for a more robust insurance on our, especially these major projects?
Yeah, so we usually don't get involved in insurance companies because that's usually, I believe, it's with the DCCA insurance division.
So the federal government has it, right? The federal government has been very critical of captive insurers. So what do they do?
I believe that on an annual basis, they maintain a list of surety companies that's authorized to issue bonds on federal contracts.
Can we do the same thing?
Saying DCCA, check.
That would be good.
Okay, let's do.
DCCA.
Yeah, I suggest that you folks reach out, or somebody reach out to the Insurance Commission. Thank you.
Yeah, and
Thank
then
you.
see if we can add that in there.
Okay, would you like to move to some of the other challenges, Guy, and suggestions? Professional
Went through.
services, procurement?
Yeah, we went through this professional services of, maybe try to reinstate the waiver if less than 3 firms submit their qualification.
Okay, so that one, we're looking at maybe after, if in fact you can't get it the first time, second time, and if it's a specialty, to do a waiver. So maybe if we
That's
can get more specific language like that, we can consider that.
Or not just specialty professional services, but if we're trying to put that language where designers would be responsible for design errors, and again, if only 2 firms agree to that provision and they submit their qualifications, then I would think that we should be able to select from the 2
Okay.
firms.
So
have to-
if in fact we pass that kind of a measure or have that, then yes, I would think we need to trigger that.
So I think you had mentioned that, it's not that lengthy a process to go back for a second advertising for the contract.
Right.
So if you could put that language in, I think there's some safeguard that, it just wouldn't be
Right.
abused. So something like that we'd be willing to look at if you send us some language.
All right.
Okay. And finally, since we have 2 minutes,
Emergency
the
procurement,
emergency procurement, yes.
Yeah, we can get a little bit more flexibility. I believe Highway is going to provide you some information on this, but there are situations where at times we cannot operate like the private sector. As you know, we rely on our own resources as far as revenues are concerned from the airlines and also from the concessions. Here at the airport, one of our most important things is to provide safety and security to the traveling public. Right now, we do need to replace our sheriff security vehicles. And the issue that we have right now is that there, as you guys know, all over the world, we need the software, the chips that go into these vehicles aren't being manufactured quick enough, so we can't get the cars off the assembly line. That being said, we do have a procurement with a company called Dodge, but then we're looking at 9 to 12 months out. Our lieutenant did look into how we can get these vehicles sooner than later, and he was able to work with Chevrolet, and they had, I guess, had some 7 police built Tahoes that was readily available, but at this point, it takes time to get an exemption, and I'm not here to throw SPO under the bus. Bonnie, I did talk to you about this earlier, but it does take about 3 weeks to get some kind of notification whether we can purchase it or not. That being said, what the fear is that we would possibly lose these 7 vehicles to another customer someplace in the States. So everybody's short of vehicles, and if we have that opportunity to purchase something, I'd like to have that flexibility. Another example is that, and Guy, maybe you can chime in on this, but it takes about a year at least to build some kind of a facility. Right now, the TSA has come forward and told us that Maui Airport is in showing statistics that at one point the average was about 9,000 passengers per day. Right now, the last couple of days was 12 to 13,000 passengers a day. They've notified us and they told us that they can provide screening equipment and labor additional at that airport, provided we build a facility before Thanksgiving. That's about 3 months from now. That being said, my only alternative was to reach out to the airlines and ask them, the consortium, can they help fund this themselves? Because at the end of the day, we have a residual system, and it, like we said, rates and charges are based on the airlines' infusion of revenue along with the concession. So that being said, somehow, some way, you know, if we can get projects like this and take advantage of a TSA, I guess their, you know, offer, that would be really great. So again, flexibility, trying to use some, you know, common sense and be able to get things done sooner than later to take advantage of such certain situations would be greatly appreciated. How we get there, we've got to change the law on emergency procurement.
You know, the language that you provide, though, it looks like it's for equipment failure and repairing property. It doesn't seem to cover what you're saying when you need equipment. It's not equipment failure, you need equipment. So you need to look at this language that you're proposing to us and give us examples of where it really is needed and how we can, again, have it fair and yet get you the equipment that you need when we need it, especially during this period. Yeah.
So we did, you know, kind of utilize what I always had, and it does, you know, to prevent serious disruption and continuing functioning of government services. So that's kind of where I was looking at. So we need the safety and security for our traveling public with the vehicles, and then this TSA screening checkpoint. That's also to help the government services offer to our traveling public.
Yeah, so you look at that language that you're proposing here, it doesn't include what you're saying. It's more repairing and, you know, equipment failure.
Yeah, so what I guess what we didn't put in there, I was trying to explain, is that, if we can get a little bit more flexibility when it comes to emergency procurement, so that we can get things done sooner than later.
Yeah, we agree that there should be flexibility so you can do the job that needs to be done at the time. But again, just with the idea of the safeguards around it, so being clear on the language of where you need the flexibility would be helpful. So take a look at that recommendation again.
Got it.
We are moving to the end, but I'm going to ask if there are any final questions. Senator De La Cruz, Senator Kim, Senator Fabella. Well, thank you very much, Ross and your team.
When are
Jade,
you going to get back to us?
we're gonna submit some questions to you on the
They
follow.
didn't answer the violations?
We can ask.
Somebody violate?
So we're going to come back to you, Ross, on some of these questions that were still unanswered, and if information that we're requesting, for example, the violations and what you're doing about it. We'll get back to you with a list of questions that came out of this briefing. Appreciate all the information by you and your staff and what you've prepared for us.
And when I want to see the design timeline. Because I still think that a lot of change orders, as they mentioned, are design errors. But that's because of, like we talked about, the poor scoping at the beginning, which could have avoided a lot of the change orders.
So we'll be asking you for that, but if you can start working on that, on the design stuff that's missing from the flow chart, the front end design, how
Well,
do
I'm
you
still
do
not
that?
clear, Ross. When you guys have a design error, at what point do you say, okay, this design error is too large, where we just have to do a new RFP? Because that's what happened when we talked about UH, where there was change of scope and they tried to fit it into another RFP versus just doing a new RFP. So that's where I'm still unclear with the design errors, change of scope, and if you end up shoving it into an existing RFP, but really it should be a new and separate one because it's a different design.
Does the city fall under our procurement laws?
Understand.
The city falls under our procurement laws.
So I'm not sure if you guys can include some of that.
Okay.
Just a quick question, Bonnie. Does the city follow our procurement laws?
There's, well, I guess. Bonnie, are you still on?
Probably not. We can ask her that.
Yes, I'm still on. And yes, everybody in the state, including the counties, follow the same procurement statutes and rules.
Okay, but we don't know what their how they run it though. Like how we're asking each department, they could have their own way of doing stuff and interpreting it.
They could. I mean, they have their own processes, but the statutes and rules are exactly the same for everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Any closing words, Jade or Ross, Guy?
No, we thank you for your time and the questions that are brought up. And again, we have every intent to better the system. And we learn from our mistakes. We're not perfect. And I know for the future, these are good types of questions and suggestions that can only make us better for the future. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Appreciate all the work you've put into the presentation. So we look forward to going forward with some of your suggestions as well. Thank you. There being no other business, this briefing is adjourned.